All right, welcome to Everyone Needs an Aquarius, our interview section of the show. Today on Everyone Needs Aquarius, we're excited to sit down with a storyteller who has spent his entire career shining light on the voices and histories most people overlook. Alan Govenar is an award-winning writer, filmmaker, folklorist, and founder of documentary arts organization dedicated to preserving the cultural traditions, creative work, and lived experience that make up the fabric of American life. He's authored more than 40 books, produced acclaimed documentaries, and captured stories that stretch from blues musicians and folk artists to tattoo pioneers, civil rights history, and everyday people whose lives tell us something about all the deeper things that we see. Alan's work isn't just a document culture. It expands it. It challenges it. It invites us to see the beauty, meaning in our places that we miss. We thank you for coming on Everyone Needs an Aquarius. And thank you and appreciate you coming on, Alan.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, let's start out. So where did you get your start? Where does it all kind of begin for you in your career and your life?
It begins in my childhood. I grew up in an inner city neighborhood. I grew up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, in a triple decker that my grandmother had bought in 1920. I was born in 1952. By the 1950s, this was a neighborhood in transition. There were lots of African Americans moving into this neighborhood in the 50s. There were Haitians, there were other immigrants that were coming into what had predominantly been a Jewish community. It was a time in which there was the beginnings of racial tension that existed. Fortunately, I had parents who were socially progressive. My father did a lot of interfaith work. He was a tireless volunteer. He was a Boy Scout for 35 years.
Oh, wow.
He worked with juvenile first-time offenders. He was really trying to make a difference in his world. And so I grew up in this atmosphere where I felt comfortable moving between worlds when most of the people around me were not. They were fighting against it. And so early on, I developed particularly an interest in African American music and culture. The first records I heard growing up were LPs that my father bought of Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Sarah Vaughan,
the greats,
New Orleans R&B. So I grew up hearing black music, and it became an area that I enjoyed. Didn't really anticipate, I guess, ever studying black music, but it was the music I loved. It was the music of the civil rights era. I was into R&B and soul, and as time went on, and I moved to Texas, my interest became more focused. And for me, coming from that environment, I was in Ohio for a while. I moved to Texas to go to graduate school. The Texas blues sound was something I hadn't really heard or known much about. And it was surprisingly not very well documented when I got to Texas in 1980. And so I began researching this music, and that became a threshold for me into a lot of the work that I do.
So, I mean, I don't know if have you seen the movie Sinners yet?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. What did you think about the since you brought up the blues and things like, what did you think about the blues injections into that film?
Well, I thought it was, for me, I was responded to it in a lot of different ways. I particularly liked the scenes where it sort of harkened back to African music, because there was a project, a lot of my work when I was beginning in the 1980s, a lot of my take on American culture was more appreciated in Europe than it was in the United States.
Of course.
I mean, the whole interest in blues, for example, was in the US, it was very Mississippi centric. It was like, where was the origins of the blues? Well, for me, it was clear the blues was part of the African diaspora as it came to America, through the terrible and horrors of slavery and the aftermath. of what blues music became is an expression of freedom and the quest for a better life. So for me, my interest in the music had a big audience there, not so much in terms of, being a performer, which I never was, but in terms of the kinds of music I was interested in. I was very interested in roots music.
Yeah, because in Centers, it was so much about the whole, like you said, the whole diaspora of African music and the form of it and how it is permeates through all the culture, especially the scene, the barn scene where you're looking from the outside and you're seeing all these different types of music that come from the whole diaspora from all different cultures. Let's go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What I wanted to mention before we leave that was, the way in which it established kind of the African antecedents to American blues. My work in France led to me doing work in Africa. And
where in Africa were you at?
I worked both in Dakar and Nairobi. But in Dakar, I was invited by the French Cultural Center to do a lecture on African influences in African American music, and our blues singer John D. Holman from North Carolina, and they showed my films, and I recorded African music. I was particularly interested in the griot roots of the American banjo, and so that scene in Sinners, where you see the performer playing the African banjo, I mean, I don't know exactly who that performer was in the movie, but he was very much in the ilk of people I had recorded when I was in West Africa.
Yeah, his name, the guy's name is Miles Caton. He's like a child prodigy musician. Like he's been playing like the banjo or something since he's like 3. Like it's some crazy. I'm sorry.
Where's he from?
Where's Miles? Let me see here. I think he's from New York.
Really?
He's from New York.
Oh,
he's like a child prodigy. Like he's like this musical I think he taught himself. It's some crazy story he has. And that was his first film, obviously, that he was in. But he's been doing music for like he was 3 years old. It's a crazy story.
One of the people that I recorded in Dakar was a man, Baro Saul, and he had toured with Santana.
Wow. Okay.
And he came to my hotel room with a little group, which I recorded. But he had this instrument. It was called a hodu, and it was a 5-string African banjo, quarterphone instrument. And it had 4. It wasn't like a banjo. It was a banjo. And John D. Holman, who was the performer I brought with me, was able to tune this instrument to an open G. But he had it was an instrument that had been made by a friend of his father's in the 1920s. And in the 1970s, when he toured with Santana, he put an electric pickup into this instrument. So it had this uncanny sound.
Yeah, it's something about that sound of a banjo that's like it feels very much not of here but of here, like at the same time. In the whole time period. So what does a documentary truth mean to you? Like that's a part of what you've said documentary truth mean to you?
Well, for me, everything I do is in one way or another documentary. I mean, for me, my first writing, I started my first book. It was a collection of poems when I was 17. I started a book when I was 18 that became a novel, published 50 some years later, just this last spring, called Come Round Right. So a lot of my rooting is in creative forms. My documentary work that is more factually oriented is in a way an outgrowth to that. I mean, for me, reality reveals itself in different documentary forms. Sometimes it's a poem, sometimes it's a story. It can be a novel or a play. I work in musical theater. It can also be the recordings of someone I might meet and invites me into their living room to listen to what they can perform. So for me, documentary truth is what's presented to me. I believe the people I document. And for me,
But
I don't
how do you come up
want
with
to
the stories?
impose this. I don't want to impose this, just my perspective on truth. For me, truth is ultimately objective. And sometimes there's more truth in fiction than there is in fact.
How do you decide who you're going to do stories with? Who deserves their story being told? Like, how does you deserve to be documented? Like, what makes you think that needs to be the thing I want to document?
I've always liked talking to people. And so I'm the kind of person who talks to people I don't know. And a lot of what I create, I hope, has that kind of appeal. There's a musical of mine that I created called Texas in Paris. It was an off-Broadway show. I believe it was done in New York in 2015. And it was based on real people that I had met. My first show in Paris, stage show that I did in Paris, was in 1989. It was called Texas in Paris. And it was an African-American woman who had never been on an airplane before. She sang a cappella spirituals. It included a cowboy singer who at the time was breaking horses for a living. He performed at camp meetings and rodeos. And there was a street singer that I had met in Austin. And this became this show. Well, through that show, I became more intimately aware of the way in which everyday music has a everyday drama to it. And so years later, the interaction, particularly between the African-American woman and the white cowboy singer, became the catalyst for developing this show. But there was a certain messaging there. This was after, Ferguson, Missouri, and what happened there that I wrote this. And it became a show, a musical that's about the racism of ignorance. Two people who live in isolation of each other and have preconceptions. So in the stage show, it's about a singer, two singers who had never met. One lives in the inner city of Dallas and the other lives in West Texas. And they're brought to Paris to perform, and they have trouble understanding the French people who adore them when they speak English. So they end up having to talk to each other. So it becomes a dialogue about race that is in some ways unexpected, and they butt heads. And eventually they come together through their music, and they're trying to make sense to each other and make sense of their own lives.
When is it set? When is the play set? Like, what time period is it set?
It was set in the fictional past. I mean, essentially, that stage show was in 2015. It's really set around that time.
Okay.
Because responding, it was a show that I wrote to respond to this situation. But by then that it became a stage show, the original people were deceased, and the elderly black woman was played by Lillias White, who's a Tony Award winner, and singing a cappella spirituals with cowboy songs. And that show took its shape, but it revealed a kind of truth about America. A lot of my work really is trying to cut through the veneer of just popular culture. Not that popular culture is not in its own way revealing and telling. So the medium is defined by the conversation. Flashing back, I met Osceola, the old black woman, through a member of her church. I was working on a folk festival. I wanted to bring a group of black kids doing hand clapping games into this festival. And the woman I was working with said, "You must meet Miss Mays." And I went to see Miss Mays, and she sang for me. And so, like many people that I interact with, I have sustained interaction. I mean, for me, I have a visceral response. You know, hearing her sing, you know, made my body, you know, I had goosebumps listening to her. And similarly, this white cowboy singer who I met in West Texas, who I met through a rancher who was fixing his fence line on the side of a road. So it all begins in conversations,
Yeah.
you know. And so that show is one example. Another is a film of mine called Looking for Home that I did over a period of 4 years, in the middle of which was, you know, the pandemic and the lockdown. But I was also going through a lot of health issues. And I just started talking to people in New York City about, on the street, about the meaning of home in their lives. And so the lockdown happens, and I meet this family right before the lockdown happens from Argentina in Grand Central Station. And I interview this 20-year-old girl, and she says, "Oh, please send me the interview." So I sent it to her. And during the lockdown, she started sending me selfie videos of her life in lockdown in Buenos Aires. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
started getting these from different people around the world. And so that whole movie is about conversations. And that's became the basis of the medium of expression. In some cases, it's a visual reality. There's a film of mine called The Hard Ride, Black Cowboys at the Circle 6 Ranch. And it's a ranch. I was doing radio shows in the 1980s and came across this little ranch in Southeast Texas. And I photographed it. And 10 years later, I made a movie about the people at that ranch. So
It's interesting you bring up Black Cowboys. My uncle was a cowboy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on the ranch in Argyle, Texas. He just passed away in July. But all the Black Cowboys came out for his funeral. He was a calf roper. He owned 4 or 5 horses. My cousin was a barrel racer. And he taught me everything about Black Cowboys. Books over there for days. Everything taught me on everything about Black Cowboys from the beginning to the end and how they're connected to, you know, everything that we're in our society now. So it's interesting that you did some stuff with Black Cowboys.
So where's Argyle, Texas? I don't know that.
So Argyle is north of Dallas, so like northwest of Dallas.
Really?
So it's in between, basically, in Denton and it's not Denton. It's close to Denton.
Yeah. I've never been in Argyle, Texas.
Yeah, my uncle was the first Black family to move to Argyle, Texas, when he moved there in the 90s.
Well, the area that I focused on were these 40-acre and mule ranches that existed and still exist between Beaumont and Houston.
Okay.
And these are, you know, there's a Black Rodeo Association there. And I focused on that. These were family-owned Black ranches. So these were Black cowboys who tried to compete, but because of the racism of the day, had trouble competing. They started their own rodeo. And that also became a stage show that I did in DC. I did it at the National Black Arts Festival in Atlanta. But yeah, the Black cowboy culture is finally kind of getting its due. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was doing this in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of material out there. There's a young photographer, I don't know if you know the work of Raheem Fortune, the Black photographer in Texas, but Raheem, you know, is someone, he's much younger than me, but he's done an amazing job of kind of photographing aspects of the Black cowboy culture in Texas. Where are you? Where are you based?
I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
Uh-huh.
I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and that's where he was from. He's from the north side of St. Louis. And he decided at one point, I want to be a cowboy when he was a kid. And then he built his whole life around that and moved down to Texas.
Huh. Well, I've only been to St. Louis a few times. But do you remember a blues singer, Henry Townsend?
Yes, I do. Yes.
He was someone, when I came to St. Louis, that I interviewed for a radio series I was doing.
Yeah, I think Henry Townsend is from the north side of St. Louis, I believe. Let me make sure. Oh, he's from Wisconsin, Mississippi. Okay, but was he? So he was in St. Louis for a while. Oh, he was in Cairo for a while. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
He's in Cairo for a while, which is a whole nother town that's in Illinois. That's basically like it's a ghost town almost now. It's one of those small towns that was a railroad town that ended up becoming nothingness now.
When I met him, he was in St. Louis.
He's in St. Louis. Okay. Yep. Cairo. He's from Cairo. So yeah, he came here, and that looks like he came here. Okay. Yep. In '79, he was recording here in '79. It looks like I'm reading here. But I've heard my uncle has played them for me. Like my uncle put me on so much blues, so much culture of our history and where we come from as African Americans. But when you're writing and you're doing a film, writing, how do you see yourself more as a conduit, or do you feel that you're kind of just, witness or creator, or like where do you kind of fit in when you're making your things?
It really depends on the situation. I have great respect for the people that I document and work with. And so I want the people I'm focused on to drive the dialogue. And I'm a good listener, and I filter it into different forms. Depends what I'm doing. I mean, I might spend the afternoon recording someone like Henry Townsend and then go to my hotel room and write poetry. So, I mean, that's the kind of person I am.
Renaissance man.
Well, I don't know if that's it, but I have this creative impulse that keeps going. That's for sure.
So what do you think is your most impactful work of when there's something like that? I like when it's all said and done and I'm done. This is the thing of like, this piece defines my career and my work.
Well, it's in more than one form.
Right.
So I'm still very active. I'm 73 years old. I'm nowhere close to retirement, I hope. And I'm focused in different areas. So this year has been kind of a watershed year for me. I mean, it started in January with a 50-year survey of my photographs. And then in April, May, there was the world premiere of a new musical of mine called Stompin' at the Savoy. The story, and it's based on my book by that title. It's the story of Norma Miller, who was one of the first acrobatic swing dances.
Have you ever seen the movie Stompin' at the Savoy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Norma lived that. And I had met Norma, and she was the choreographic consultant for me for another musical of mine that I did with Akeem Babatunde called Blind Lemon Blues. And Norma grew up in the 20s in Harlem and became a swing dancer. And she was working I was at that time, Blind Lemon Blues was about the 1920s and the music of Blind Lemon Jefferson. Well, Norma was in Dallas. I brought her to Texas, and she was sitting in my office, and she told me this great story about her as a girl, that in Harlem, she grew up in a tenement which faced the back of the Savoy Ballroom. And she saw, in summer nights, she'd watch the silhouettes of the dancers in the Savoy. And by the time she was a teenage girl, she was busking on the street. And one of the premier dancers of the day, a man by the name of Twistmouth George, came out of the Savoy and said, "Hey, kid, you want to dance with me?" And by the age of 15, Norma was touring in Europe. And so this is a new musical. The book of the musical is written by myself and Phaedra Michelle Scott. And it's basically a look at Norma's life around the age of 16. It's a coming of age story.
Oh man,
that show did very well. In May, there was a novel of mine that I alluded to, Come Round Right, which I started when I was 18. It's based on true events and something traumatic that happened to me during those years. And it started as a poem. It became a short story. I spent many years rewriting it, coming back to it, and finally that was published. So for me, that's one of my most important books because it is basically, I think, establishes a kind of groundwork. It's not a memoir, but it's about my coming of age. And it's an expression of that time when I grew up in that pivotal time between the end of the 1960s and the beginning of the 1970s. It's set in the fictional past of 1970 and the fictional present of 1971. Then there are a couple of nonfiction books of mine on tattooing that came out this year, and then currently there's a 40-year survey of my work with documentary arts that's at the Center for Photography at Woodstock outside New York City. And there are two shows there. One is called Everyday Culture, 7 projects of documentary arts. And another is a show called Kinship and Community that draws from an archive that I founded in 1995 with my wife, artist Khalida Doolin. And this archive is the Texas African American Photography Archive. And we have a collection that has built over the years that we're in the process of gifting and exhibiting. But this is a show that was curated by Nicole Fleetwood. And there's a book that's being published by Aperture about that collection. There's a book that goes with the Everyday Culture exhibition. So it's been a very heady year for me.
Yeah.
And it's been a reckoning of different sorts. It's gratifying, but it's difficult because I resist using the word culminate because I'm still making. I'm still actively involved. So we're hoping that Stompin' at the Savoy is going to have a production next year, the beginning 27 in New York. I'm still working on other books and exhibitions. And so for me, the best book is the one I'm writing right now.
Okay. I mean, and so my last question, this is a big one. No, it's a big one. It's what do you think needs to be documented now that someone needs to be documenting this now in 2025 going into 2026? What needs to be documented now, you feel, in your opinion?
Well, for me, it's been very also issue driven. There's a new a feature film of mine called Quiet Voices in a Noisy World, the struggle for change in Jasper, Texas. And as you know, there was this terrible lynching that occurred in Jasper in 1998. Well, I had gone to Jasper for the first time in 1996. Our archive was doing an internship program with historically Black colleges.
James Byrd, for people that may not know, James Byrd was the individual he's talking about.
Exactly. But so in 1996, I went to Jasper for the first time. This was 2 years before the killing of James Byrd. And the archive was doing an internship program and working with historically Black colleges in Texas. And the professor at Wiley College, his wife, was a grade school teacher in Jasper. And the archive is largely the work of community photographers who, like this photographer in Jasper, had another profession. He was a barber. He was an elder in the church, but he did photography because it mattered in terms of the self-esteem of his community. And he had died in the 1980s. I met with his widow, and she gifted these collections to our nonprofit, Documentary Arts, to this archive. Well, 2 years later, this horrible incident of extreme racial violence. And I stayed in touch with the people there. And so, like many of my projects, I have sustained interactions. And it's not that I talk to people all the time, but the people in Jasper. I did a show in New York at the International Center of Photography of this photography of Alonzo Jordan, the town barber and photographer. And there was a group who were alumni of the segregated school in Jasper, J.H. Rose Schools, and they got like 300 copies of my book. And at that point, we knew about 5% of the people that were in these photos. And they circulated this around the country to different people who had graduated the school, and they ended up identifying about 95% of the people.
Oh, wow.
And as time has gone on, this group of people, largely in their 70s and 80s, who are tireless volunteers, have been doing everything they can to turn the tide in Jasper. And they're reclaiming their own history. They're fighting against the politics of erasure. And they quietly do this. They're quiet voices. They put up signs, roadside markers for Black historical sites. They've built 3 little museums related to segregated schools, Black veterans of foreign war. They've started a scholarship fund for Black kids in this area. And so the movie is about what people can do on a local level to fight against the politics of erasure. Because for me, the most pressing need in today's world relates to issues of race and gender. I mean, I think that the politics of erasure must be addressed because we're going to lose this history that is so critical. It's not just Black history or white history. It's American history. We're all part of it. And so much of the political forces of the day think they can divide and conquer. And I'm not part of that world. I've always lived in a mixed world, and I'm very comfortable moving between worlds, crossing boundaries that other people do not want to cross. So I work with people who want to have an open dialogue. I started a nonprofit organization 40 years ago called Documentary Arts, but I've never been a full-time executive director. Everything is project-driven. Me, like everyone else that does, we're a group of like-minded people with a mission. I have a mission, and my mission is to make America a better place, a more equitable place. And so for me, even in the musical theater world, which is struggles for equality and equity, my main collaborators are Black. This is something that we do together. And so for me, that's the messaging that is most crucial to what I'm about and where I feel I need to focus as much attention as I can.
Well, Alan, thank you for coming on Everyone Needs an Aquarius. Where can people reach out to you and check out some of your things and what you have going on?
Well, there are a couple of things that people might want to look at. The best source of general information is documentaryarts.org. But there's also an online magazine that we publish called truthinphotography.org, which is an open forum. We feature the work. It explores issues of truth in image making and the need for truth in image making, or how does one achieve truth in image making in this very AI world that we're confronting. And it's an international online forum that I developed with Documentary Arts, but with Magnum Photos, Aperture, and the International Center of Photography. And it features the work of everyone from high school photographers to some of the most famous photographers in different places around the world. So definitely check that out. You might want to check out the First Run Features website for my movies. I have more than 24 movies that rent for anywhere from 99 cents to $2.99 on Amazon Prime. I mean, most of my 40 books are on Amazon. So I joke often with my friends that
you everywhere.
Well, except I qualify that because I don't have that much hubris, is that my work is known in lesser known places everywhere.
But it's still known. You're still everywhere, though. That's the whole thing. You're still everywhere. You're still everywhere.
I'm not giving up. We're still.
You're internationally known and locally accepted.
Well, thank you,
Alan.
so
thank
much.
you so much for doing this. We appreciate you coming on.
All right. Well, send me the link when you're done.
Yes, I will.
Hey y'all, if y'all like what y'all see here on Everyone Needs an Aquarius, be sure to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with your friends because we got all the tea. And, if you want to check out more stuff from us, be sure to hit that button right there on the right side so you can see other stuff and, again, share it with everybody.